Welcome back. I hope you had a quick chance to re-energise. We have lots more content to cover. Let's move on to our next panel of the morning, digital skills in the workforce. Digital skills shortages are inhibiting the sector's capacity to adapt to the changing technological demand. The previous 18 months catalysing the growing gap between the technologies available and the digital skills present in our workforce. Pandemic saw a speedy response in the delivery of new digital services. However, without the relevant digital skills to utilize those services, the services cannot be used to their full potential. Therefore, we must ensure that the transformation in infrastructure is met with equal development in digital skills to continue the sector's progress for a digitally transformed landscape. Well, joining me for this conversation on implementing digital skills in the workforce, we have Georgina Maratheftis, Programme Head for Local Public Services Tech UK, Councillor Helen Coomb, Cabinet Member for Transformation and Digital at the London Borough of Redbridge, and Phill Adams, Senior Manager, Employment Skills and Learn, Devon at Devon County Council. Now, don't forget to submit any questions that you may have for our panellists in the live Q&A function, which you'll find on the right-hand side even of your screen. Welcome to all my panellists. We've got another full house, which is always exciting on a virtual event. Phill, let's start off with you. We hear the phrase skills gap a lot. I mean, I've spent the last few years in this environment with NHS conferences, rail conferences, and we always have a whole panel discussion on the skills gap. Before we work out how we can start to tackle it, can you just paint a picture for us of, how bad is it?
Well, I think, Helen, it's fair to say it's about as bad as we've seen it for a while. To give you a feel, Devon yesterday was running 30,000 live vacancies, and we've got about 14,000 universal claimants on the claimant count. So we're looking at about 2 to 1 in terms of vacancies on the ground. In terms of digital, because I know we're talking about digital today, we were running about 2,500 vacancies, and we've probably got about 300 to 400 digitally sort of trained or level staff. And talking to colleges, apprenticeships are down by about 20% on some of the digital cohorts. So it's tricky. I mean, what we're finding from employers and what we're seeing on the ground is, as they're saying to us, there simply aren't enough trained staff, and there's certainly not enough expertly trained and technical staff. We're going to be in a position over the next couple of years where it's going to be all hands to the pump to get this right. So, yeah.
And just going back, Phill, I hope you were able to hear our keynote speaker a few moments ago, Stu Higgins. Mm-hmm. And, I'm guilty of this. When we talk about the skills gap in the digital world, I tend to think of, programmers or, cyber experts. And he was talking about, it's people like civil engineers that we're short of, and the people who will physically dig the fibre into the ground.
Yeah, and it's a really interesting topic for us. So Devon County Council leads on the Connecting Devon and Somerset programme for DCMS. And one of our biggest challenges over the last few years is the infrastructure development piece. So we've been having to look at new innovation. We've been having to look at new skill sets around mole machines and around doing stuff on glass verges and changing the way that we actually do the delivery. But to do that, you need a completely different set of capabilities. On civil engineers, we've got a massive shortage. Programme managers, I think, are number 5 on the list of vacancies that we're currently chasing across the patch. And having gone through those contract processes over the last 6 months, the biggest challenge we've got is finding the workforce that can do this, young people that want to enter the sector to do it, and working with those existing members of staff to actually upskill them around fibre, around fitting, around meshing, and all the other things that come with that. So it is a difficult time, but really promising in terms of the future sector and a huge area of opportunity for us as well.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's an area that we can talk about later, that we need to get into primary schools as well and make sure that we're encouraging children to, be engaged with the right sort of subjects that will lead to jobs. But Georgina, let's bring you into the conversation, if we may. How can industry and public sector work together to tackle that skills gap?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Helen. And I guess just for those that are familiar with Tech UK, we're the trade body for the tech industry, and we've got about 850 members that span the breadth and depth of industry, and 2/3 of those are SMEs. And I guess for us, our main mission is, how can we improve that collaboration across public sector and industry when it comes to that transformation piece. And it's what you said at the start in your intros, Helen. Nothing, the technology is easy, but nothing will happen without the people, the culture, and most importantly having the people with the firstly capacity and skill set to make the most of that technology. So that's why I think it's important for industry and public sector to collaborate early. So firstly, when they are, so public sector are looking to procure a solution, having those discussions with industry to actually, how can you help us implement it, that long-term sustainability, to make sure, that a supply is not coming in with a product and then leaving. Actually, how can they work together on that? But also for public sector to make the most out of the skill set of industry. So a few years ago, Tech UK launched Tech Connect with the civil service, specifically the DDAT fast streamers, where they had placements within industry, and that was all enabled by one of the senior chief digital officers being the champion of that, and that enabled both industry and civil servants to co-design and deliver innovative services. So I think there's different ways, whether it's through placement or through kind of procuring, where industry and public sector can collaborate. So I guess they are both more value added partners and moving away from that supplier just being that sales added partner, in terms of we sell you something and then we move on, because I know our members are keen to go beyond that, because it's to their benefit as well to have people with the right skills in place.
Helen, I am looking forward to hearing more in a minute about your Connecting Redbridge partnership, which I've done a bit of background reading on and found it really fascinating. But on the skills front, first of all, how can we create a culture and training offer for a digitally skilled workforce?
So when I'm thinking about the workforce, I'm thinking about the people that already work for the council. Those people who have shifted, more or less all of them, not all of them, obviously we're still collecting bins and things like that, but even that has technology attached to it now, so that we can report missed bins and all those really popular things that come into councillors' lives. So I'm thinking about, the stuff that we've got at the moment and the programmes that they use. And somebody earlier, Yvonne Gallagher from the National Audit Office was saying that as senior managers don't necessarily have the capability, and I took from that, to understand actually what is out there, what can you do? Because I think that people work in grooves, don't they? So you're shown a programme, you use it, you get a new bit to it, it throws you. In pre-pandemic times, you could just call across to somebody on the other side of the office and go, "Oh, for God's sake, can you just sort this out for me?" But now, obviously, when most people are working at home, that possibility is not so easy. And I think it's actually not just about instilling skills, but also instilling confidence in the workforce that we've got. And having instilled that kind of confidence, then people have a much more open mind about trying other things instead of just sticking to what they know best, I think.
Would you agree with that confidence in the existing workforce, Phill?
Absolutely. And I mean, that's what we've seen on the ground, as Councillor Coomb said, ensuring that we can build up that confidence and putting in place resources and mentors to try and get people comfortable with the way that systems work and the way that we roll them out has been a big part of the way certainly we've done business. And I know other authorities and other public sector partners have done business over the COVID period. It's been a bit of a journey, I think, for us all, trying to learn what works, because it was a very different environment where we find ourselves in our back bedrooms with a bit of kit and not necessarily the help that you're used to in your office. But by putting in place those friendly faces, by putting in place those technology specialists with a sort of an easy to talk to ability. What we've done is we've slowly started to move colleagues that, it would have been anathema to them probably 10 years ago, to a point where they're more comfortable with technology than they ever have been. And, it's interesting. This morning I've walked through an office where everybody's on Teams, everybody's on Zoom, we're all sitting there. If you just said that to me 18 months ago before the crisis, that would have never happened. So it's been an interesting journey. Yeah.
It has. Helen, I know you've been thinking a bit differently at Redbridge. I wondered if you could share with us a bit about the Connecting Redbridge partnership, how it came about and what you're actually doing.
So we always knew that there was a digital divide, a skills gap, a data access gap, an infrastructure gap. And these are the things that even before the pandemic, people had started to think about. How could we actually improve on all of those things? But we realised that as a council, we've got limited opportunities. We've got limited amounts of money, limited amounts of time, and we haven't necessarily got the expertise, and we haven't even got the reach across all the residents and businesses across the borough. And so we realised that we couldn't do it on our own. So we reached out to different organisations across the borough who were already doing lots of really great work. And we just wanted to connect all of it together so that we could work better together and achieve more. So we've connected with Vision, who are our deliver culture and leisure services for the on behalf of the borough. Redbridge, New City College, the Redbridge Institute, the DWP, the Chamber of Commerce, and the voluntary sector, just to name, sort of the players in that, and coming together to see how actually we can deliver the skills agenda for residents, as well as the workforce. So that's where we are at the moment.
And what are the most important things you think you've learnt on that journey, Helen?
That actually there is so much good work going out there already, and it's a question of actually, if I, as a citizen at home, want something, where am I going to get that help? And to be able to actually put all these things out there so that people can navigate their way around the system, and that actually in such straitened times that we're not just replicating things in different places and then not extending the reach. We're just replicating stuff but not getting it any further out there.
Georgina, do you agree with a lot of what Helen said? And is collaboration key, and also putting people at the heart, do you think, which it sounds like it's happening in Redbridge?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I think when we talk about, digital skills and technology, I think it's easy to get distracted, by, the sexy stuff, talking about, AI and all the new technologies, but it always comes back to, what's the problem it's trying to solve? How will this, improve the lives of residents and people in our places? So I think it's ultimately changing the way we approach, I think, service delivery. Pardon me, typical, I'd get a cough right in between talking engagement. How we sorry about this.
That's okay, don't worry. Do you want to take some water for a second?
So I think it's ultimately about rethinking how we design and deliver services, and I think that's why the collaboration piece is so important, because for many people that is a new way of doing things and thinking. I think if anything, the pandemic has taught us that digital doesn't just sit with the IT and digital team. It's, everyone's responsibility. And, we've seen so many, councils, organisations, people adapt to that. I think the pandemic has removed that layer of risk aversion to do things differently. So we definitely have to build on that. And I think, that collaboration piece is important, especially as place-based working has become the norm, and which Councillor Coomb has, articulated. And, local government, unfortunately, there's not a money tree. So they have to work with, partners across the place, including industry, community groups and health. So I think that's when that collaboration piece is really important, and then together actually identifying, what are the common challenges we want to solve, and then actually, going out procuring for a technology and solution. So I guess what I'm describing isn't your typical, digital skills in terms of, a programmer or, a coder or engineer. I think it's just to highlight that, we all have a responsibility, or our employers, to train us up to at least be aware of that and know what the questions we need to ask, and to have that digital mindset, which doesn't mean you have to be digitally technically minded or a technologist, but to be aware and then to connect with the relevant teams, and also I think make the most of your supplier as well, when you are working together, not just to rely on them. You also have a role as someone in delivering that to understand and ultimately focus, what is the problem that you're trying to solve.
Phill, how have you changed the way you deliver services at in Devon, and do you work in a collaborative way with outside organisations to help improve the services you deliver?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think it's interesting. Both Georgina and Helen have touched on a number of points where we've done very similar things. So to give you a feel, I lead the adult learning department internally. So we're quite used to externally working with a lot of those digital partners around digital training and some of that sort of wider agenda. What we had to do as COVID came in is actually look internally and use that provision that we're so used to deploying in the community with, corporate partners like Google and Microsoft and other people into our own organization. Had to bring the technologies in, had to change the way that we do business, had to look at the portal approaches that we've got across services and that remote piece. But then to get to that point, we had to come up with a skills and training plan using our own people, and actually basically go back to basics on training our workforce in the way that we've been training everybody else's workforce for the last 5 years. And that's been an interesting journey. I think a few lessons we've learned. Channels were really important on this. Not everybody responds to sitting at their desk working on a laptop. We found some people wanted to do it outside of work. We found that actually a bit of peer pressure and family pressure was interesting here. And it was all the tactics that we've used in community delivery on digital inclusion, but deploying them actually on a county council. And it's been fascinating watching that play through. Now, I'd love to say that we've reached the end point of that, but we've still got gaps. We've still got areas where there's new technologies haven't quite gone through. But we have moved to that digital first approach, that idea that actually we shouldn't be frightened of using a digital platform or solution. We should look at it in the round. It doesn't replace people, always going to need people first, face to face. But actually what we're finding is those hybrid solutions are now much more viable because that fear factor, which we've struggled with for so long, is gone. So it's really, really been exciting to see that come through. I mean, certainly on my side, we've now got a curriculum which is more digitally focused than it ever was before this started, and we're not planning on going back.
Just wondering how receptive, the workforce have been, and you sort of about there's perhaps been some cajoling and encouragement from family, etc. And also, has there been, and I speak from personal experience of this, I think I have in the past been a bit of a technophobe in a way, and actually there's great satisfaction now. I mean, even hosting virtual conferences, which I've been doing a lot of over the last few months. Normally these events are live and I'm in my comfort zone because we're in a big room with 500 people. I'm on a stage. I'm a TV presenter. That's how we rock and roll in TV. And, the other day we were doing one of these conferences and I completely dropped off the platform while a guest was speaking. And my 17-year-old said to me, "Oh my goodness," she said, "I couldn't believe how calmly you just sort of, hoped the guest would continue as I navigated myself back on." Is there a sense that people feel a sense of achievement who have perhaps been a little bit, not perhaps had that fear factor of actually taking the first step and jumping in, but then feel satisfied when they're seeing what can be achieved digitally?
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, I think what we're seeing on the ground is definitely that's matured. Those first 3 months where we were on digital solutions, I mean, the look of terror that came across people's faces when they would say your mic's off or my camera's breaking up. And certainly those first couple of council meetings where we were using digital solutions and remote solutions for the first time, understanding how that was going to work and some of the logistics, it was interesting. But I think what we've seen is, you're right, absolutely right, that confidence is built and people have changed their perceptions, and it's changing the way we work. It's changing the inclusivity, consultation in the old days, and we found it over the last few months. It used to be we would have to set up a large event in a village hall. It would take days and days to set it up. We would never be sure who was going to turn up. We can now run virtual events and virtual consultation where we get a far greater number of people into a room than we ever saw in the past. And it's allowed us to do new things in that service transformation area that we wouldn't have been sort of confident enough to do under the previous operating model. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can talk about older members of staff where there is a real sense of achievement in that they were always the ones that would say to me, I'm not doing that. I don't, it's too much of a faff. Let's just get in the car and drive across. Whereas now it'll be, why are we driving? Why would we ever do that? What were we thinking? So yes, no, absolutely. I think we've seen that culture shift, and I think it's continuing. And I think it'd be interesting to see what the next step is.
I'd imagine that's a culture shift you've seen as well, Helen, is it?
Oh, absolutely. Because we now have online forums, that kind of thing. We have online council meetings, and they're just much more efficient. And also, member briefings for councillors on planning applications and things like that. It really does focus people's minds, I think, in a much better way, because you don't get I remember in 1982, that sort of thing. You think, oh, please, no. So they actually have to really focus their minds on what's going on. Say, for instance, when a planning application is being explained. And I think that terrible though the pandemic is and has been, there are some good things that have come out of it for the way of working. And I think that actually we really need to make sure that we keep those things, and we don't just think, oh, well, it's all over now, we can just get back to work as it used to be, because I don't think that, I think that would be a backward step. Absolutely.
We need to embrace what we've learned and build on it. I'm also interested, Helen, to know if there are aspects of the digital inclusion and transformation agenda that you can't do yourselves as a council.
Well, exactly, because we can't reach everybody. People's needs are different. People are not always comfortable coming to the council for everything. There might you get a much better take up if it's a small community group. Then with those people, with the digital transformation and the enabling people to actually use it, and thinking that yes, this is something that they can do. This is something for them. And there's a comfort factor as well, which ultimately increases people's confidence and willingness to use these things.
I'd like to talk about bridging the divide, Georgina, and being inclusive, and how we make sure that we bring everybody on this digital skills journey to make sure that nobody's left behind and that residents can access digital services. That's always the takeaway for me that I worry about, that we all embrace all of this, but how do we make sure that nobody gets left behind?
Yeah, I think that's so important. At the start of the pandemic, I know Tech UK partnered up with, I think it was the Daily Mail Force, around this to provide devices to school and children that needed that, which was amazing, and there was a great response from industry on that. But I think devices is only one part of the very complex problem of digital inclusion. There's the connectivity as well. But I think even if you remove all that and you provide a child, for example, with the device, it's making sure actually that they have the confidence to use it as well. I think that's the most important thing, and I think that's what we need to remember there. And I think across the country, we've seen some great initiatives. I know the Greater Manchester Combined Authority have launched a digital inclusion task force that includes lots of public services across the region, as well as industry that have not only kind of shared best practice what they're doing with others, but have also made various commitments there. But I think it goes back to my earlier point around that service design and understanding, you know, what is the user need of your, you know, of your place and the residents. I think it's having that digital channel, but not everyone will want to utilize that, and that's okay. But it's making that clear, and you know, people being able to navigate that system, and those that do want to engage digitally being able to do so in a seamless way. So yeah, I think not many answers, more questions, because I think it is just such a complex issue. But I think it does take, you know, it takes a whole group community, I feel, to solve digital inclusion and actually to tackle that digital divide. I think it starts from schools equipping students with those digital skills to industry and everyone in between.
And also, I think, Phill, I know you're nodding there, I know you'll have a lot to say on this, but, you know, reaching those, how can we reach those better who are digitally excluded? And I'm thinking more perhaps now the older generation, you know, perhaps the generation that I'm sure some older people will have joined like Helen's meetings and digitally and felt more included because they can join remotely. But what about the people who, you know, don't see the postman anymore because everything's, you know, that nobody looks at their door, and that might have been the only person they saw? How do we reach people who are digitally excluded and may never actually get to grips with it?
Yeah, and I think it's...
Oh, sorry.
Go on, Helen.
Sorry, go on, Helen.
No, I was just going to say that this is something that comes up quite often whenever I'm talking to councillors or in council meetings, that kind of thing, about what about the people who can't get online. And so I've two lines on that. One is that we will help people get online. You know, there's an offer out there through all these different organisations, through the libraries as well. And the other is that actually those people that don't want to, for all sorts of different reasons, then actually the more that the other people who can and choose to go online and interact digitally with the council, that actually frees up more time, more capacity for the council to actually talk to people on the phone, that kind of thing. And, you know, presumably when we do finally get back to face-to-face, that kind of thing. So actually we can focus on the people who really need it
more.
Yeah.
Phill, what were your thoughts on that?
I'm in a similar place. I mean, I think what we're finding is the digitally included, we are in the place where we can shift that resource. We can start to look at how do we deal with the 10%. And with older citizens and residents, absolutely, there's a group there where it's about that comfort factor, and we're doing some specific tailored work, and it's those collaborations that Georgina talked about, making sure that you've got those communities of interest together, those specialist services, the Volcom sector and others, who are really good at working with these groups, understand need, understand the demand, and sort of mapping it there. And I think there's a lot of good work. The only other thing I would say is that there's probably a couple of little bits in there. One is don't stereotype the audience. You know, older people, some of them are fantastic at this. Younger people have just as many issues, and we find that particularly amongst some of those that are in that generation between sort of the WhatsApp generation and the sort of older generation, there is a core group in there that are the silent ones that don't talk about the fact they're not digitally literate. The other piece is face-to-face doesn't go away. So some of this is about actually getting out in the community and using your face-to-face resources. And that's always going to be the case. Yeah.
I was guilty there, wasn't I, of stereotyping? I'm sorry about that, because I know plenty of younger people who aren't that tech savvy too. We are really drawing to the close. We've got about a couple of minutes left. So can we just end on sort of maybe key challenges facing the public sector around digital skills delivery? What are your thoughts? Kick us off, Georgina.
Yeah, I think for me, I sound boring or like a broken record, but it is about collaboration. And it's understanding, you know, what is the art of the possible in terms of, you know, what, when you think about the outcome, what do you want to achieve? So that's why I always say, you know, for public sector and industry, engage before there's a procurement. Bring in your heads of services, not just rely on the procurement teams and IT teams. Enable them to see, you know, what's possible. So I guess Maratheftis is more focused on, you know, this colleagues actually within local government there, but you know, I think bring them into the journey, get them excited about what is possible. And I think obviously the last year has definitely shown them what is possible, but you know, beyond what we're doing now, there is so much more. So I think it's starting early, articulate what's the problem, and yeah, making sure you know, collaborate much earlier before, you know, you decide on what the solution is, and then those responsible for the delivery of it aren't quite sure how to make the most of it or implement it.
Same question to you, Phill.
Yeah, I think following on from Georgina, I think the other bit for me is keeping the momentum. So we've set a course. We've demonstrated that it's not something we should be scared of. I think the difficult bit now is transitioning back to that hybrid model and making sure that we don't go back too far the other way. I think there's a real risk that we lose a little bit of that momentum. I think the other thing is assuming that digital can do everything. It can't. There's going to be that happy medium that we've got to find. But I think there's, as I said, I think we're in a good place there. I think the momentum's behind this. I think it's just making sure you've got the right offer, as Georgina's talked about.
And no pressure, Helen, but you've got the final word of the morning session.
Well, what I would say about the digital transformation is that, you know, automatic robotic processes, chatbots, things like that, fine, great, marvelous. But actually what we really need to do is to turn it on its head and think, what is it that the residents need? What do the citizens of the borough need? And then work back from there. So it's what I don't want us to be doing is to go, oh, this is a very laborious and boring process on bits of paper that we've always done. Let's just shorten it and put it online and have an online form. Because actually, that's almost like a Victorian scratching away at ledgers, isn't it? We don't need that anymore. But what service do we need to deliver? What do the citizens need? And then work back from that to do it in the most efficient way, which will help the citizens and not bore the pants off the workers.
That is a great final thought. Thank you, Helen. And indeed, thank you to all of my panelists. A great discussion to come back to. It really is encouraging to see, isn't it, just how much work's going on into developing the workforce to be better skilled and keeping up with the ever-changing challenges new and emerging technologies present. Right now, it's time to break for lunch, and that gives you a chance to unwind. If you can, jump into the meeting hub and continue to gain connections and build your community with your fellow delegates, or chat further to those you've already met. I hope our 3 panels this morning have given you plenty of food for thought and some topics to break the ice. The connections you build now are there for you to use way into the future, logging in at your leisure and exchanging views with not just the delegates here today, but future registrants too, really building your community. Our speakers can offer you plenty of knowledge, but a significant source of knowledge on our platform, of course, comes from each and every one of you. So do feel free to share your insights too. Just a quick reminder for you, we've got a great and rewarding prize for those fully taking advantage of community building. Those in first, second and third places will get to donate in their name to the Magic Breakfast or More Trees. Let's meet back at 2 o'clock for our afternoon session and our next panel discussion. I look forward to seeing you then. Thank you.